Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something truly foundational, maybe the most fundamental topic we've covered.
I think you might be right.
We're diving into Richard Feynman's explanation of the hydrogen atom from his lectures, Chapter 19, and specifically how solving this one simple atom unlocks the entire logic of the periodic table.
It really is the key. If you want to understand chemistry, why elements behave the way they do, why the periodic table has that repeating structure, well, you have to start right here with hydrogen.
Feynman himself calls it the most dramatic success?
Most dramatic success in the history of quantum mechanics.
Yeah, our goal today is basically to follow his steps from the basic equation to understanding, atoms in general.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The model is simple. One electron, one proton. Hydrogen.
The simplest atom there is.
And we make some crucial simplifications to even get started, right? Like, the proton is just sitting there.
Essentially, yes, it's vastly heavier than the electron, so we treat it as fixed at the center. A good first approximation. And importantly, this is a non-relativistic treatment. What does that mean in practice?
It means we're ignoring effects that become important when things move close to the speed of light. So no special relativity, no complex magnetic interactions like electron spin talking to its own orbital field, that sort of thing.
We're stripping it down.
We're focusing purely on the main player, the electrostatic attraction, the Coulomb force between the positive proton and the negative electron. That's the potential energy. V2R equals A to phi 2R. Depends only on distance, $3.
And the equation that governs all this is the Schrödinger equation. We don't need the full math, but conceptually, what's it doing?
Think of it like the master equation for quantum systems. You put in the energy description, the Hamiltonian, which includes that potential energy, and it tells you about the wave function.
Amplitude isn't the electron's path, but...
It's the amplitude. The square of its magnitude tells you the probability of finding the electron at any given point in space. And crucially, solving the equation reveals the only possible allowed energy levels the electron can have.
Right. Now, solving this equation, Feynman points out that using standard $6 YZ coordinates is, well, really hard.
A nightmare, basically, because the potential is spherical, depends only on rod-roller. So naturally, you switch to spherical polar coordinates.
Distance, polar angle, azimuthal angle.
Exactly. That switch makes the math manageable because you can separate the equation into a part that depends only on the radius dollars and a part that depends on the angles, the theta and phi.
Does he tackle the full angular dependence right away?
No, he starts simpler. He looks first at solutions where the wave function dollar doesn't depend on the angles at all, spherically symmetric states.
Meaning if you rotated the atom, the probability of finding the electron looks the same from all directions.
Precisely. These correspond to states with a zero orbital angular momentum. We call them states.
Okay, but even that simplified radial part is apparently still messy algebraically.
It is, and this is where Feynman introduces a really elegant trick, scaling the problem. He realized that if you measure distance and energy not in meters and joules, but in natural atomic units derived from fundamental constants, the equations clean up beautifully.
So using the atom's own inherent scales, what are they?
Two key ones. First, the natural unit of distance.
Yeah.
The Bohr radius, $8. It's about 0.528 angstroms, roughly the typical size of the atom.
Okay.
And second, the natural unit of energy, the Rydberg energy, $8. That's about 13.6 electron volts, which turns out to be the energy needed to ionize hydrogen from its ground state.
So you rewrite the equation using these units.
And the algebra just simplifies dramatically. It almost reveals the answer itself. When you look for physically meaningful solutions, the bound states where the electron is trapped.
The energy can't be just anything.
Exactly. The math forces the scaled energy, let's call it epsilon, to take on only specific values. It has to be epsilon and 2, where nonr must be a positive integer, 1, 2, 3, and so on.
And that dollars is the principal quantum number.
That's the one. It dictates the main energy level.
So translating back from the scaled units, what's the final energy formula?
The allowed energies for the electron in a hydrogen atom are 1 in name, as is ERN22. The energy is negative, meaning the electron is bound to the proton, and it comes in these discrete steps determined by no dollar.
And the incredible thing is, this result derives purely from theory.
Perfectly matched the energy levels that scientists had already measured experimentally for decades by looking at the specific colors of light hydrogen emits or absorbs. That precise match was the dramatic success. It showed quantum mechanics wasn't just a weird idea, it was correct.
Okay, but that was for the simple C states, the spherically symmetric ones.
Yeah.
What happens when the electron does have orbital angular momentum?
Yeah.
When it's actually, orbiting?
Then the wave function must depend on the angles theta and $5. The probability of finding the electron is no longer the same in all directions, and this brings in two more quantum numbers.
Alongside the principal quantum number 9. So 9 gives the main energy level, sort of the overall size. What do the new ones describe?
The next one is $, the orbital angular momentum quantum number. It tells you about the shape of the electron's probability distribution. Dollars can be 0, that's our C state, or any integer up to 1 of 4.
So for undollars must be zeros, only unstate. For undolars can be 0, unstate, or 1 state.
Exactly. And the third quantum number is the magnetic quantum number. It describes the orientation of that orbital shape in space. For a given dollar, it can take integer values from $1 to +$.
So for Limber, state must be 0, only one orientation, which makes sense for a sphere.
Right.
But for Nussel dollar, capital state can be -1, 0, or +1. 3 different 2 states.
Correct. 3 distinct orientations in space for that orbital shape. We usually label states by $, and the letter code for lumbers. Lumbers is P, lum is P, lum is the dollar, and all or the law and so on alphabetically.
Let's visualize one. What does that L1 or end in dollars state look like? Feynman describes the amplitude.
Yeah, the amplitude for that state turns out to be proportional to the cosine of the angle theta. So the probability, which is the amplitude squared, goes like to where.
Okay, let's picture that. If theta is the angle from the vertical axis, the third air is maximum at the poles, or 180 circ, and 0 at the equator.
Exactly. So treta theta means the probability is highest along the positive and negative z-axis and 0 in the entire 6y plane.
Like a dumbbell shape oriented along the z-axis.
Precisely. 2 lobes of probability. The other past states have similar shapes but are oriented differently, like along the 6y axis. These shapes are critical for understanding chemical bonds.
So the full wave function, TCLT and LA, is this combination of a radial part depending on $1 and an angular part depending on theta, theta, phi, phi.
That's right. The radial part, FL, FLA, or R, tells you how the probability changes as you move away from the nucleus, and the angular part, the spherical harmonics theta, gives you the shape.
What about those radial parts? Do they just decay smoothly?
The ground state, N1 elytrals does, its amplitude is highest right at the nucleus and drops off exponentially. But for higher $1, like NL2 or NL3, the radial functions have bumps. They wiggle.
Wiggle, you mean they cross 0?
Yes, they have nodes, specific distances $2, where the amplitude and thus the probability is exactly 0. The number of these radial nodes turns out to be 1L20, so the total number of nodes, radial plus angular, is always $1.
Interesting. And there's another key feature for states that aren't sus states, right? Something about the center.
Yes, a crucial boundary condition. For any state with orbital angular momentum, so little dollar, PD, F states, etc., the wave function must be 0 right at the nucleus.
So electrons in p, air, or 5 orbitals are basically guaranteed never to be found exactly at the center.
Correct. Only 60 state electrons have a non-zero probability of being found right at the proton.
Why is that? Does it connect to anything intuitive?
It does, actually. When you work through the math for the radial part of the Schrödinger equation, a term pops out that looks exactly like the $+1R22 term you'd get from a classical centrifugal force.
Ah, the centrifugal barrier. Like swinging a bucket of water around keeps the water in.
Sort of, yeah. It's a quantum mechanical effect, but it acts like an effective potential that pushes particles with angular momentum away from the center. It keeps the orbiting electrons from falling directly into the nucleus, mathematically speaking.
Okay, this detailed picture of hydrogen is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we get from here, one electron, to, carbon, iron, uranium, all the other elements?
That's the big leap. Solving the Schrödinger equation exactly for atoms with multiple electrons is, well, basically impossible analytically. You have the attraction of each electron to the nucleus, but also the repulsion between every single pair of electrons. It gets incredibly complex very fast.
So we have to approximate.
We do, but the approximations are guided by the principles we learned from hydrogen, plus one absolutely crucial new rule, the Pauli Exclusion Principle.
Right. What does that state?
It states that no 2 electrons in an atom can occupy the exact same quantum state. A quantum state is defined by the 4 quantum numbers, none, and the electron's intrinsic spin, which can be up or down.
So each unique combination of $1, m$ in spin can only hold 1 electron.
Exactly. And electrons will always try to fill the lowest available energy states first. These 2 rules, fill lowest energy states, 1 electron per state, are basically how you build the entire periodic table.
Let's try it. Hydrogen, Z $, 1 proton, 1 electron.
The electron goes into the lowest energy state, 1 un, Li as lies other. The 1 state, we need about 13.6 eV to kick it out, the Rydberg energy.
Helium, Z2 at $100, 2 protons, 2 electrons.
Both electrons can fit into the 1 state because they can have opposite spins, one spin up, one spin down. Now the undulator shell is completely full.
And helium is famously inert, very stable.
Extremely stable. The filled shell configuration is very low energy. And look at the ionization energy, the energy to remove 1 electron. It jumps way up to 24.6 eV for helium. It holds onto its electrons tightly.
Okay, next. Lithium, Z433, 3 protons, 3 electrons. Where does the third electron go?
The 1's shell is full, so the third electron has to go into the next lowest energy level, which is the Lan 2,2 shell. Specifically, it goes into the 2's state.
And lithium is totally different from helium. It's superreactive, an alkali metal. Why the drastic change? It has 1 more proton holding things together.
But here's the magic of quantum mechanics and shells: shielding. Those 2 inner 1's electrons orbit between the nucleus and the outer 2's electron.
So they block some of the nucleus's positive charge.
Exactly. They effectively shield the outer electron from the full +3 charge of the nucleus. That outer 2's electron only feels an effective nuclear charge closer to +1.
Making it much less tightly bound.
Much less. The ionization energy for lithium plummets back down to about 5.4 eV. It's easy to remove that outer electron, which is why lithium readily forms positive ions and is so chemically active.
And this pattern explains the whole table.
It's the fundamental reason for the periodic trends. You fill up shells. When a principal shell, like O-1 for helium or 1N2 for neon, with 8 electrons filling the 2's and 2p states, gets filled, you get a very stable, inert, noble gas with high ionization energy.
Like neon or argon.
Right. Then the next electron has to go into a new outer shell, like sodium after neon. It's shielded by all the inner electrons, weakly bound and highly reactive. An alkali metal again.
So the table's structure, the repeating chemical properties, it's all a direct result of how these quantum states, these shells defined by Noel and the dollars, get filled according to the Pauli principle and shielding.
Precisely. It's not arbitrary at all. It flows directly from the quantum mechanics of the atom.
And Feynman points out this even extends to predicting the shapes of molecules.
Yes. The spatial arrangement of those sewer orbitals we talked about, the spheres and dumbbells, dictates how atoms can bond together and the angles between those bonds.
He mentions water, HO, having a bond angle around 105 degrees, and ammonia, NHs, having angles near 90 degrees.
These aren't random angles. They arise from how the hydrogen atom's orbitals overlap with the oxygen or nitrogen orbitals, which involve those p-state dumbbell, to form stable bonds, while also trying to keep the electron pairs as far apart as possible due to repulsion. The geometry is baked into the wave functions.
It's really quite profound. Okay, let's recap the journey. We started with Schrödinger's equation for the simplest atom, hydrogen.
We used spherical coordinates, clever scaling with the Bohr radius and Rydberg energy, and found that the solutions naturally lead to quantized energy levels, and then alkalis earn 22.2.
We saw how angular momentum introduces the $10 tall quantum numbers, defining the shape and orientation of electron orbitals, like the spherical self-dates and dumbbell states.
And then the real triumph. Using these hydrogen-derived rules, plus the Pauli Exclusion Principle and the concept of shielding, we can build up an understanding of all the elements and explain the structure and repeating patterns of the entire periodic table.
It provides a complete, powerful framework for why chemistry works the way it does.
It really is the foundation.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Think about the fact that these abstract quantum rules, derived from looking at a single proton and electron, not only predict the light emitted by stars light years away, but also dictate the precise, tangible angles in a water molecule right here on Earth. The structure of everything around us seems deeply rooted in this fundamental quantum mathematics.
A beautiful connection.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.